Okay, greetings and welcome to Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 12th of November, 2023. I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. Let me just make sure she's there.
Hey, greetings, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to give you a review of community-related news over the past 2 weeks. Now, remember, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We should be streaming on those, so you can give us chats and say hi, and Sister Oleander will bring them up. And if you've got a comment or a question you want to share with us or the audience, please feel free to do so. We've got a really jam-packed program as ever. I'm not sure we're going to make it in an hour's time. It would have been more like 90 minutes, but I'm going to whiz through. And as usual, we're going to start with libations, and that's where we, give remembrance to those who have recently passed or any notable anniversaries. So, with no further ado, let me get started. And the first we remember is to the late elder Maurice Silvera. Now, Maurice, our elder, was passionate about education. He actually turned down a possible football career. He was quite a gifted footballer at a young age, well, we've been told. He became responsible for developing what's now known and recognised as one of the best mathematics scholarship programmes in the UK, from what I'm hearing, throughout his more than 30-year association with Kingsdale, which is the institution that he worked at. He oversaw the transformation of the mathematics faculty, ensured it became highly esteemed in South London during his tenure. So there's been many positive comments made about him. One of the ones I'll read out now says that the relaxed, modest and humorous way in which he talked to students marked him out as an immensely strong teacher, the kind you are lucky to meet a few of in your career. And sadly, following a battle with cancer, he passed away in the early hours of October. There's now going to be a Maurice Silvera Scholarship Fund, and that's going to primarily help those from disadvantaged communities who have had to overcome significant barriers to continue their education at university. Now, the fund has already exceeded its target for this year, and it's received many thousands of pounds in the first few days. So it's good to know that his legacy will live on, and we remember the late elder Maurice Silvera. The next we remember is a bit more of a tragic one, unfortunately. This is of our sister, Pesaran Kuy. She joined the ancestors at the age of 35. She was found tragically by her children in Little Hutton. She had suffered a single stab wound to the chest and passed later in hospital. Now, the 45-year-old man who was suspected of her murder fled the scene. He was later arrested, and I think there's going to charge him. Apparently, he was on license from prison after a previous violent attack, but neighbours found him or saw him hiding in bushes before the tragedy. So it does look like this person is a high candidate for being the suspect. But what we want to do, as ever, is just remember our sister Pesaran Kuy. The next we remember is to our brother, now of course ancestor, Robert Dyer. Now, this is one of those bizarre ones where our brother spent 4 days away in Jamaica during a retreat in the country without his vital medication. Now, he had type 2 diabetes and a heart complaint as well as high blood pressure. And, he went for a walk and he vanished. No one could find him. Now, they have found him, unfortunately. So we know now that he's no longer with us. And he's joined the ancestors. And when I say it's bizarre, I mean, our brother Robert, he just overcome prostate cancer earlier this year. He'd been doing some amazing charity work in London, including delivering talks to men about how to deal with and overcome cancer. And this isn't, this is what makes this more remarkable is that his cancer was spotted last year at a very advanced stage. So the fact that he actually overcome it and was actually teaching others how to deal with it is remarkable. But unfortunately, It's one of the things we have to remember when we do leave the UK, or when we travel abroad and we need to carry our medication with us. I don't have much more details about what happened other than that, but he has joined the ancestors. The next we remember is a memorial in many ways. This is an anniversary of the late great ancestor Ken Saro-Wiwa. And I say Ken Saro-Wiwa, but I should of course always remember 8 of his colleagues who were murdered alongside him for protesting against the oil spills in Niger Delta. Now, our beloved ancestor was arrested in 1994 after the deaths of the 4 Ogoni chiefs at a political rally. Now, he wasn't involved in this, but he had to sit for a fixed trial in Nigeria. He was found guilty for alleged complicity in the murders, and he was executed by hanging. And, I'm going to mention Shell Oil, because Shell Oil was the company, I say still is, the company involved in this crime. As far as I'm aware of, they deny it. But Ken Saro-Wiwa, along with his fellow activists, really, that helped galvanize the world. A lot of people, not just African people, were really passionate about trying to secure justice and to get the truth out there. And it led to calls for economic sanctions against Nigeria, because Shell, the Dutch company, were doing deals back and forth with the Nigerian government at the time. Now, what happened was that Shell announced its natural gas project was worth around $4 billion, which was one of the largest foreign investments in Nigerian history at the time. And in 2009, it eventually paid just over $15 million in an out-of-court settlement to resolve the lawsuit that was brought against it in 1996 on behalf of the Saro-Wiwa family and the others. Now, Shell, like I said, was accused of being complicit in human rights abuses in Nigeria, and as well as the executions, but they have denied all wrongdoing. It's one of the reasons why I still don't buy oil from Shell. So, people will know sometimes I can be on the last dregs of petrol when I'm driving, and I just won't go into a Shell petrol court, just because of the strong memory I have about this case. So we remember. That's the last libation for today, this week. I'm going to go to the next section. And just as a reminder, you're watching.
Hi. Just to say, we've got a few greetings. So one from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nations sends greetings. And Mr. The 4-3 says good evening. And Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation says the sound is okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the sound check. It's good to know that you can hear us okay, that you can see us okay. And we appreciate you accompanying us on this journey. I'm going to continue on with the news broadcast. There's quite a lot to go through. But just as a reminder, though, for those of you who've just joined us, you are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, you're welcome to interact with us, just like our 2 guests just did, through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We should be on all those platforms. And of course, I always forget to say, don't forget to subscribe, like, or just share if you find this broadcast useful. Now, this next section is going to be looking at the domestic politics that's affecting our community in the UK. And I'm going to start with a story which is basically just something that's probably not going to be of much surprise to any of you. And this is a news analysis from the TUC, which is a trade union in the UK, which has revealed that African and minority ethnic women, so African, Asian, and other marginalized groups, are now 3 times more likely to be on 0-hour contracts than European men. Now, as a result of this, and it's been an ongoing issue, campaigners are continuing to blast the government and other politicians, because that's including the Labour Party, for not doing more to prevent these marginalised women suffering the double pay gap resulting from both racism and sexism. And this is like the double, there's a triple whammy, but those are the 2 that this analysis kind of like highlights. They found that there's over 150,000 African and Asian women on 0 contracts. And out of them, 1 in 3 work in health and social care, and particularly in residential care. And they're suffering a staffing crisis, basically because the median hourly pay is just so low. So this is something I just thought I'd share with you. It's an ongoing issue in the university sector. We call it the four fights. People don't talk about it much. A lot of people focus on wages and pensions, but precarity is another big issue, and discrimination is another issue that needs to be addressed when people are thinking about industrial strikes that kind of like went all out throughout the year across so many different sectors. The next story is one that breaks my heart, and it's still live, it's still ongoing. So if anyone can actually help, I beg you that you get involved. And this is the story of Dr. Doseline Kageguru. Apologies if I mispronounce her name. Now, she's a Kenyan expert in world literature. And it should be a good news story, actually, because she found that she secured a permanent position at Bristol University. And she was overjoyed when this news came out. But that all changed last week when Suella Braverman's Home Office refused to allow her 6-year-old daughter to join her. I can't even speak to what kind of level of cruelty that is, but that's exactly what happened. The government, as we know, is disproportionately blocking academics from what they refer to as the global south from coming to the UK. So if you're based in New Zealand or Canada or Americas, it's a much easier path. But if you're coming from Africa, you're coming from Asia, you're coming from what they refer to as the Middle East, then it's much more trickier to come to the UK. But in this particular issue, the fact that she has a 6-year-old daughter and she's not being allowed to come, and let me make it clear what the Home Office said. They said when a letter which was addressed to a 6-year-old kind of like was written about asking why, they said it saw no compassionate grounds on which she should be allowed to join her mother. And the letter, and like I said, this was written to the 6-year-old, said, "It was your mother's personal decision to depart for the UK." So this is the excuse they've given. I mean, I don't know what kind of, who would write that to a 6-year-old? And so there's arguments that this is perhaps a way for the government to kind of like pressure her to leave her job, all the work she's done to secure this role, to go back to Kenya. It's just deportation on the sly. But this is a live case. It's not the first time it's happened. There has been successes in getting the Home Office to turn around. I know it's difficult when you've got Braverman in charge of that department, but it does mean that if you are in academia, if you are someone who's very good at like organizing, then it's keeping the spotlight on this, keeping the pressure, the momentum going on this. Because like I said, this has been overturned in the past, but it's very, very difficult. It's ridiculous that anyone should have to argue that it's wrong to separate a mother from her child. I mean, what are they arguing? The 6-year-old is going to be an illegal immigrant, a terrorist? I mean, I don't get it. I just don't get. Yeah. So I think if I saw something online today, I don't have all the details, but they've added now to this letter, not to the 6-year-old, but they've added other reasons now that they might be saying, administrative reasons why they won't allow the 6-year-old to come. But it's just a horrendous story. I'm going to move on. The next story is one about, and I can't, this is the headline says it all. Is this the UK government planning to brand anyone who they deem as undermining the UK as an extremist? Now, this is a story that was published, I think it was last week, in the Observer, and it's really about these controversial proposals, which is looking to broaden the UK's definition of what extremism is, and it's a woofy, I mean, it's very woolly. How do we define, what an extremism is? What does undermining the country's institutions and its values mean? So this new definition has been prepared and for the Cabinet Minister, Michael Gove. Now, for those of you who don't know, Michael Gove is the one who changed the school curriculum to remove African history and to glorify empire. He's the one who spoke about Britain being sick to death of experts. He's also the government's head for levelling up housing and communities. So he's now looking at things like Windrush. I say looking at it, but not doing anything about it. But this non-violent extremism review I think that's what the term that they use it, is part of a long-going plan for what they call counter-extremism. It's expected to be launched very soon, and it's an extension of. And for those of you who don't remember, there was a policy called Prevent, which was the government's strategy to deal with terrorism. And what we found out was not only was this Prevent strategy forcing people who worked in the public sector to spy on people, to snitch on people who just had views that didn't agree with the government and try and get them deported. It went even further. I mean, it kind of like ignored domestic extremism, which was supportive of white supremacist ideas. So it'd be interesting to see where this goes. I've shared a couple of images here in this image because I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but there was a recent protest that took place. I say protest. It wasn't even a protest. It was a march of solidarity, calling for a ceasefire, for peace in Palestine, and that took place over the weekend, namely on Saturday. Most of you will be familiar with all the backdrop, the political wranglings behind that. But what's happened this morning is that the police have actually released this image of this sister. I say sister, who's I don't know her. She's clearly a young Asian woman who decided that she was going to point out through satirical means that the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister are, in her image, what she classifies as coconuts. And what the Metropolitan Police has decided to do is decided that they want to hunt her down and arrest her for what they have defined as a hate crime. Now, of course, we know that the term coconut is not racist. This is not a hate crime. It's satirical. It is an insult. It is supposed to say that your political values align with those of white supremacy and you work against the interests of your community. There's no denying that, but it's not racist. But unfortunately, there's this very simplistic definition of racism that's going around the UK. It's been around for some time now, which tends to argue that just the mention of someone's skin color or making reference to someone's skin color is racism. And of course, that's complete nonsense. That'd be like me saying that if I support Black is beautiful, then therefore I'm a racist because Black is beautiful is referring to African people's skin color, their beauty, and that's. It's just a nonsensical argument. But of course, this is what the police is actually using its resources to do, and it's actually outrageous. Now, because of pressure that's been put on the police through social media, namely platforms like Twitter, some of you would have seen the violence that took place yesterday. And there was a clip of these 4 thugs that you can see on the image to the side, accosting innocent people on their way to the march. And now the police has finally, this is the transport police have finally put out a wanted poster saying they want to investigate this and find out more. The magic of Twitter, I think 2 of the culprits have already been identified. So, we'll keep our eye on this space. But the third story, which is the front page of the Mail on Sunday, what can I say? So it's a national newspaper, and on the front page of the story of the Mail on Sunday is an image of the same government minister who's trying to redefine what extremism is, being jostled. That's what he was jostled at a station. And for those who don't know the backstory of this, Michael Gove decided to turn up at a station where he knew people on their way to the march. And the headline, you can't see all of it. It talks about he was rescued by the police. And it's this bizarre scenario, right? Like, this is the front page of a national newspaper that Michael Gove was jostled. I mean, what on earth are we talking about, right? I mean, how is this? I mean, what, if the police weren't there to rescue him, would he have been tickled instead? Would it have been an extreme case of tickling? I mean, what on earth is this story? Was there nothing else going on in the world that this had to become the front page of a national newspaper? Michael Gove was jostled and rescued by the police from extreme tickling. I don't know. People were making comments towards him, and you could say those comments were abusive. I'm not going to deny that. I wasn't there, but probably what happened. But first of all, he didn't need to be there. Why was he there? He's got a ministerial car. He didn't. I think this was a stunt, and it's been quite successful in getting people who are already against those who challenge white supremacy to actually have an excuse to try and outlaw and to criminalize people who are marching for peace. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a Twilight Zone story, but or Black Mirror episode for those of you who are a bit younger. But here we are. Michael Gove was jostled. Oh my God, shock and horror. Oh my God, they could have tickled him to death. Oh my God. I'm going to move on. And this is the story. When we were talking about extremists, this is actually a story of a real British extremist. But of course, he's not referred to as one because he's, he's a member of the elite, the political elite. Now, Nigel Farage, who's actually a possible future Tory party leader, I kid you not, he's actually outraged. I mean, he's outraged because the British monarch is wearing a black poppy. And as far as he's concerned, it's totally against the spirit of Armistice Day. And, he's outraged. He went on GB News to fizzle and pop about how it's not about class, race or rank. It's outrageous that the monarch should wear a black poppy alongside the red poppy. He didn't replace one, right? He wore both. But, of course, that doesn't matter to these extremists. Political leader of the Tory party. Anyway. That's the story there. It's not much to really go on about apart from, and this is me just being upfront. It's one thing we have to understand is that while, of course, it's good that the British monarch felt comfortable enough to wear a black poppy, because the black poppy is really to remember and honor those of us from around the world, from Africa, from Asia, from other regions, marginalized communities that exist, that live in the UK, and their contribution to the British project. I do want to share something that's a little bit uncomfortable, especially for those of you who are Pan-Africanists. And it's just a reminder that during the First World War, John Archer, who was the former mayor of Battersea, he did some good things. He campaigned for better treatment for returning ex-servicemen who faced hostility and unemployment. And this is actually a good thing. And we've heard of this story, in the past. We spoke about on this very program of those from back in the day who kind of like pushed back against the colour bar in the UK. We don't need to keep going to African American history. We have that same tradition here of people fighting back. Guy Stevenson and Guy Bailey, I think it's Guy Bailey and Paul Stevenson. We know in Bristol, but there are many others. Sam King. I mean, we know many others who deal with that. But this is an uncomfortable bit. John Archer, in 1918, he said on behalf of the African Progress Union, which is an organization he helped establish, and these are the exact words, so I'm not going to mince. He said, "Our compatriots from Africa, America, and the West Indies," that's obviously his words, "have been fighting on the fields of France against a foreign foe. We claim our rightful place within this empire. If we are good enough to be brought to fight the wars of the country, we are good enough to receive the benefits of the country." I'm not going to unpack that. I think it speaks for itself, but it's just remembering how complex this history is. Yeah, I'll leave it there. But Armistice Day is generally about the ceasefires, about peace. And those who are at the ritual, the annual ritual, calling for peace, calling for ceasefires, calling for the end of war, like the Stop the War campaign was yesterday. I think, that it's an honourable calling, but the politics around all of this is very problematic. It's very strange that we have warmongers in the House of Parliament who are refusing this call, actually going to the cenotaph and actually cosplaying as peace campaigners when they're completely the opposite. Okay, it's the end of that section. You are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I say this every week. I'm getting used to it now. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find it useful. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander, so please feel free to drop us a But I'm going to keep going on. The next section is a review of some of the general community-related news from around the UK that's taken place over the last couple of weeks. And a couple of weeks ago, we did a remember to Elana Dam. This is the horrific story of the 15-year-old princess who died after being stabbed during the morning rush hour at a bus stop in Croydon. This is when she was on her way to school. We now know that a 17-year-old boy who cannot be named for legal reasons has been charged with her murder. But yesterday, the same day as the Stop the War March, the ceasefire Armistice Day march, there was a funeral for her. It was a really good turnout. I saw some news footage. I think you had people like Stormzy turning up to pay respect. A large turnout from the community, her friends, colleagues, family members, all remembering our princess. Her auntie said that Eliane wanted to become a lawyer. That was her ambition because she wanted to defend the voiceless. She said that she didn't like injustice and she likes justice for people. So every time she'd get in trouble, it's normally because she was fighting for someone else. So I'm going to leave that there. We do remember our daughter Eliane, and like I said, the funeral took place yesterday. I think it was a really massive turnout. It was streamed to several thousand people on YouTube at the same time. The next story is this is a complex thing again. It shouldn't be a complex thing again. But if you think pretty much about how I've just spoken about how the British monarch was wearing a black poppy in remembrance to those from Britain's African nation and other minority ethnic communities who fought during the war. He was also in Kenya for a royal visit, and I'm very uncomfortable with this whole story because even though he is saying that there was no justification for acts of violence during British colonial rule, he says rule, I'd say terror, and of course he's right to say that. Those wrongs haven't been righted yet. He did the same thing that British monarchs always do, or British politicians always do. He didn't apologize. He expressed great sorrow and deepest regret. He visited the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, and they have actually requested an unequivocal public apology. They weren't happy with his statements, but they did meet him. People who have grievances from that colonial history of some of the atrocities that were carried out during Britain's colonization and oppression, kind of like told stories to him, recounted their history to him, but there hasn't been an apology. But he was there, he was doing his thing. The story that I posted underneath the image, if you can see, of Agnes Wanjiru and her murder, I just wanted to share as a reminder that the tragedies and the injustice and the atrocities that were committed to the people of Kenya weren't just during enslavement, weren't just during colonial time, but they went afterwards as well. You see, her story we finally found out about in 2012. That's around just over 10 years ago. And this is when officers of the Duke of Lancaster Regiment essentially murdered a young 21-year woman, and that's how old she was at the time. She'd been stabbed in the stomach, her body dragged to a septic tank in the grounds of the hotel in which she'd been partying with soldiers, and she was shoved inside it. It reminded me of Michelle Holness. This whole idea of, that was a horrific story, but that was done on British soil. Agnes Wanjiru was murdered. We only found out because when those officers from the Duke of Lancaster's regiment came back to the UK, one of them started not there to handle what he'd done, what the grief was. And so he made a comment about, we've murdered that woman, and it started an investigation. I don't think it's been resolved. I think there is an investigation between the police and Kenya. I think it's been complicated because Kenya has a death penalty, and obviously the British government doesn't want to put any British soldier up for the death penalty. But it's just a reminder that this isn't some old story that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. This isn't news. I mean, this is contemporary. This is in our lifetime. These are British soldiers, and this is why I was so angry that one of the reasons I was so angry that the British government did everything it could to pass a law to exempt British soldiers from. Got some feedback coming through. Okay, yeah. So the British government did everything it could to pass a law to exempt British soldiers from human rights abuses or prosecution from human rights abuses, and they did that. They tested it in Africa. They passed it in Northern Ireland, and so now what's happened is that British soldiers, even if they commit war crimes, even if they violate the most sacred of human rights, they won't face prosecution. I mean, that's I had to do some more research on finding an exact law, but I remember when this was passed, I remember this legislation, and so it's very difficult to get justice against them. Very, very difficult. And as you're seeing about the whole principle of war crimes, those powers in the UN, the permanent members, they just veto any attempts to hold them to account. So we hear words about living in a rule-based system, but it's not being applied equally to everyone. Anyway, let me move on from that story. Oh, is this Oleander?
Yeah, I know that there's some noise, so I'll try and be quick in the background. So Mr. the Fourth Free says some of the early Pan-Africanists like Edward Wilmot Blyden and Alexander Crummell did have some deeply questionable views.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yes, you're right.
Yeah, and like they saw the African continent through a European lens. And he also says, by the way, Dr. Toyin, thank you for responding back to my email last week, Monday.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yes, you're right. They like any movement, not every person in that movement is going to. We're not all going to have the same ideas. There's always going to be some contentious issues amongst us. And I mean, we speak about Fanon without often understanding what it meant when he talks about colonization of the mind. A lot of us, have had our minds colonized. I'm speaking in English, right? And so often, many of us who are in the diaspora, who are trying to do the right thing, trying to reverse and to secure justice and peace and dignity, and just for those of us who are living in the motherland or outside, outside the diaspora, we sometimes go into these issues with these colonial mindsets. I don't want to labor this point because we've got so many stories to share, but thank you for making that point. I'm going to continue on. And the next story, which is, again, we spoke briefly about this last week, and this is the story of slaver families actually being accused of profiting again from our enslavement. And this is it's not even a strange one, actually, because it's actually an accurate one. There's a wonderful piece in The Voice. I didn't think I'd ever say that. The Voice newspaper this week, covering the reparations conference that took place a couple of weeks ago. And there is critique of the fact that actually what we're seeing happen in front of us is the reparations movement changing and morphing, kind of like almost, it's just like I said, it's right in front of us, changing into this movement, which is no longer headed up by grassroots voices, but instead by now Sister Esther Hauser, who's one of our leading reparationists, talks about this kind of like groups like the Ears of Slavery. And And I often think that there's almost like a hijacking of the movement, not just by groups like that, but also by people within our community. And I'm talking about our global community now, who see reparations as a way to get a quick buck. And that's not really what the reparations movement is about and has ever been about. It's there's no space to cover this whole story in here. This is not to say that there is a slavery group don't have some noble motives. Some of them do. I'm sure they do. But their positioning, and the image I show here of the former journalist, I think her name is Laura Trevelyan, and she made a donation. She used to be worked for the BBC. She made a donation of £100,000 to the people of Grenada, and she did that after she found out her family enslaved more than 1,000 Africans there. And so this is these are good things, but is that reparations? Does that qualify as reparations, or is that part, or or was that what some people would say, compensation? Because I think there's a mix. We're getting mixed messages from some of these organizations and some of these people who are saying that they're helping us, because they're now going on the media talking about reparations on our behalf. I don't think that's reparations. That would be like a group of former rapists going around talking on women's programs and into the mainstream media about why rape was bad and how they are deciding what it is they're going to give back to eradicate the practice. I mean, it's probably a very poor analogy, and I apologize for not really able to frame it right, but there's just something distasteful about what's happening. I just had to share that. Talking on the same theme, we have an article about why Lloyd's of London's reckoning with slavery is said to just be the start for the city. And this is really important because, this year, every single week, there's new institutions coming up and saying something. It's kind of like an echo of what happened in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. The institutions coming back up, they've now done their research into their links to MacArthur, looking at slavery, looking at colonization, and they're all coming up and saying that we need to do more, we need to do something about it. And it's really complex. For me, it is, in a sense that, of course, we want organizations to recognize what they've done wrong. And it's also good when they apologize for this. But they're not going far enough. Now, this is probably the reason why, many people who are against addressing MacArthur will say that they shouldn't make apologies, because people like me will always say you're not going far enough. But in this particular case, the person you see in the image, Bruce Carnegie Brown, he's the chairman of Lloyd's of London. And he's actually saying that institutions linked to slavery can actually take actions to address the impacts which are still seen today. And that's a really important point. I mean, that's clearly what I believe. It's not just about just compensation. It's actually about structurally changing the world. I'm not saying he'd go as far as I would, but he's making a good point there. And if you think about Lloyd's, I think we don't actually recognize how implicated it was in all of this. People know about insurance, but people don't even know how the banks were linked. So Barclays Bank, Barclays is, again, Barclays takes its name from a Quaker, right? And this Quaker campaigned for the abolition of slavery in the 18th century. But the bank was clearly and totally linked with the Colonial Bank in 1918 and the Martins Bank in 1969. And these are both institutions that had direct links to African enslavement. So, Barclays Bank is one that we cannot trust. It hasn't had that reckoning. If you think about the Royal Bank of Scotland, which was now is known as NatWest, that also invested and profited from African enslavement. They provided loans to slavers, right? They knew what they were doing. And we know this, not because it's of guesswork. You can take a look at the LBS, the London, the Legacy of British Slavery database, which was created by the great team at UCL. It's still there. It's online. This is all evidenced. And of course, Lloyd's, like I'm talking about, they were heavily involved in this. So it's a good comment that Lloyd's of London, the chairman, is actually saying this. Whether things are moving in the right direction, I'm not sure, but it's a good thing. This is a bit of house cleaning. It's embarrassing house cleaning. I don't know the young woman. And this is the story of a young Black Lives Matter organizer named Zara Salim. He was jailed for stealing basically over £30,000 from a fundraiser. Now, her name is now Zara Salim. It was previously Yvonne Mania. She's an organizer for a Black Lives Matter protest. And she set up this campaign. It's one of these, I think, GoFundMe kind of campaigns to buy personal protective equipment. I think what they call it, PPE equipment, to help people who wanted to go on the march, right? And it was a really, noble cause to do this. I remember during lockdown, people didn't know what was going on. She wanted to keep people safe. She's a director of an organization called Changing Your Mindset. And this looks after disadvantaged young people in Bristol. But what happened was that they started raising money. I think they got up to 40 grand, I'm not sure, but they raised a lot of money. And she, they didn't have a bank account from what I hear. So she put some money into her account and that was it. She might have intended not to do something noble with it. But the moment she put it into her bank account, she started dipping into it. And over 15 months, she took over 2,000 payments, in fact, 2,500 payments from her bank account. And most of them, the judge said that they were spent on lifestyle expenses. So she was spending things on shoppings and her bills. She bought a new iPhone. She bought an iMac. But the bulk of the costs went on her hair, went on beauty products, on clothes, Amazon purchases, taxis and takeaways. In fact, one of the bizarre things was that she spent over 5 grand on Uber. Anyway, I think she's been jailed. It happens, right? It's just so disappointing. It's so disappointing. Yeah, I'm going to move on. This is a story about some anger that's happened after, in fact, let me give you the whole story. Basically, there's an organization in Wolverhampton called, surprise, surprise, Wolverhampton Society. And they decided to create a plaque in honor of George Africanus, who was a man who was enslaved and eventually became one of the UK's first African entrepreneurs. So, this is, trying to kind of like let people know that, his life is worthy of being celebrated. Anyway, so the plaque went out. I think it was an initial plaque. It went out. It had a little logo on it. People were saying, well, why is this little logo? Why is there no image of him? And so someone came back and decided, okay, let's make sure the plaque has got an image of him on it. And they plucked this image and they put it on there. And I don't know if you see the image there, but this image is not George Africanus. This is the image that people believe to be of Elana Dam. In fact, it's not the image of Elana Dam. People think that because it's actually published on his book and it's been widely disputed. But we don't know who this person is. But this is a person we associate with Elana Dam. So, of course, people are upset. They want the image to be taken down, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that's the story. There's not much more to say other than that. It's an embarrassing blunder, and you'd hope people did more research before they actually start enshrining history into the public domain. It was easy to avoid. Seriously, this was just a bit silly. The next story, I say story, news story, is linked to one I just spoke about earlier. So this one's really just about the huge pension gap, which affects people from minority ethnic backgrounds in the UK, specifically those of African heritage. We're finding out, surprise, surprise, that most people from a minority ethnic background have a pension pot that's around half the size of anyone from a European background. So the average European saver has a pension pot of £114,000. That's the average they've worked out. Whilst if you're from an African or Asian background, the average is around 52,000. And so they're trying to work out why is this massive disparity. And this research, which was carried out by Legal & General, who clearly want us to invest with them, has said that a lot of this is fueled because there's misconceptions around pensions and there's a significant distrust of employers, as well as a general lack of spare income, especially during the cost of living crisis. So this is just something to think about. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is going to be news to anyone, but I didn't know the gap was so huge. No, that didn't work. I'll try again. There we go. Okay, so this is a story about a prosecution that took place where a judge told a worker who basically worked in Boots that it sounds like a joke, right? That having black friends doesn't excuse someone from being able to engage in racist abuse. So what can I say without going into too much detail? I don't want to spend much time on this story. So basically, there was a senior pharmacist working at Boots. She was basically harassed by Samson Famajuru, who, sorry, let me get that right. Samson Famajuru was the senior pharmacist. She was, I don't have the name of the person the technician who harassed him in front of customers, but essentially that's what took place. And the argument was that the person said that they couldn't be racist because they have so-called black friends. Anyway, the person threatened to call the police on the person who did the racist abuse. Was a woman. She threatened to call the police on him, and he got very scared because, of course, calling the police on an African person is dangerous. Always has been, because you can be, despite being innocent, you could end up dead. We just don't know. So don't engage in false allegations. Anyway, this person said that he had very loud, aggressive tone and was in close proximity to her, shouting that she needed to leave and he didn't have authority to say so, and blah, 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 blah. It is a he said, she said story, but it's just interesting because, I didn't think in 2023 I'd be reporting on a case where a judge had to explain to someone, just because you claim to have so-called black friends doesn't excuse you from being able to racially harass someone. So yeah, the case was won, but it's important just to know that. This is also something I should really mention, something to do with the coconut thing as well. There was a case in the past where one politician called another politician a coconut. So I think it was an African politician called an Asian politician. I'm not sure. And they went to court because the Asian politician said that they felt embarrassed and humiliated. And so the judge actually did find that the person had been harassed, but said it wasn't racist. I mean, so people are starting to lose their mind about whether calling someone a coconut is now a hate crime. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's where we are. Let me keep going on. This is more in the same vein, and this is the story of a waitress who actually received a £16,000 payout as part of a racism case after her boss demanded, and get this, they said that she had to remove her wig. And then they told them to remove her wig because they wanted to see the hair behind her under wig. And when she didn't, they tried to take the wig off themselves. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. Now, this is a teenager. She was 18 years of age. She said she felt very flustered, very uncomfortable when Sadiq Al-Safar, that was his name, repeated suggestively that she should remove the hairpiece, which she actually wore to shield her braids from the cold. So the panel actually ruled that by doing so, the Iraqi-born restaurant owner and chef had racially harassed her. And she, like I said, she was awarded over £16,000 in compensation for race harassment and constructive dismissal. She left straight afterwards, of course. While you're trying to drag someone's hair off, you're not going to go back to that place of work, are you? Right? You don't feel safe. Ridiculous story for 2023, but yep, this is the UK for you. Surprise, surprise. This is an interesting one. This is actually one which is actually showing the potential actually of AGI. I say AGI, which is artificial generative intelligence, because it's not intelligence, it's generative text. It generates or It generates, I'm talking about things like ChatGPT and the software that people are losing their mind about. And the reason I say that is because there's been a new study that's revealed that Europeans are 36% more likely to get a positive response when searching for a rental home than African people. Now, I know this is not news to you. You've probably seen the BBC report a couple of years ago, which showed this happening. But this is a new investigation. It was done with the help of that AGI software. Basically, there's an organization called Generation Rent. It set up 2 fake profiles on a platform called Spare Room. The only difference between the 2 profiles were the name and the skin colored applicant. So one was presented as a European, which is the one called Lizzie, and the other one named Zuri was presented as an African. And so they kept on making applications to different accounts to see what the results were. And this is where they found out that, 36%, basically African people were 36% more likely, or Europeans 36% more likely to get a positive response than African people. And I gave an example of what happened. So there's a particular account. It said, "Hi Lizzie, can you tell me a little about how long you'll be looking for the room?" This is when it went from the European profile. But they sent a request literally minutes afterwards, and the same account would say, "I'm so sorry, it's just been let." So this is kind of like what's taking place, right? And we saw this with the BBC report a few years back when they did it for the phone calls. Now people are just doing it online using this ChatGPT type software. Again, 2023. Okay, let's move outside the UK just for half a second. And this is one basically where there's been a survey of, I think it was around, was it 20,000 people? I think it was 20,000. I haven't got the numbers in front of me. Yeah, 21,000 people across the country in Germany. And they found out that nearly 20% of African people suffered repeated harassment and targeting of Muslims and Asians, I should say. 20% said that they've been subjected to repeated threats of harassment. And this is, like I said, the first time the survey has been done on this kind of scale. It's been published by the German Center for Integration and Migration Research. It's not a surprise to many of us. The reason why I wanted to share this is because what they want to do is what this center wants to do is actually carry out this survey annually. And then each time including questions on different sectors such as housing and labour. And I think that's actually a very good idea. And I think that's something that we should do in the UK, something that Legally would have probably been involved in. But that's the kind of thing I think we should be doing, like an annual audit. We had the Creed report, which the government kind of like did, where it used all our resources, our public funds, our taxpayers' money, to come to the conclusion that institutional racism and structural racism doesn't exist in the UK. I think it's really important that we have institutions that actually do an annual survey and show the true picture of this. And let's be clear, the bottom line of this report was that over 50% of African people in Germany suffered some form of racism. And that's outrageous. I think the figure would probably be higher in the UK, if I'm honest with you. And so, as I come close to the end of this section, I know it's a long program, and I just want to remind us all that there's still violence taking place across the African world. The United Nations has announced that violence in Sudan has escalated, and they've used this emotive term that it's version on pure evil. And the UN humanitarian coordinator that you can see in the image, Clementine Nweta Salami, has said that the fighting has escalated 7 months into the war between the army and paramilitary, and they continue to receive unrelenting and appalling acts of sexual and gender-based violence. They see enforced disappearances, they see arbitrary detentions and grave violations of human and children's rights. And it's just a reminder, she wrote a statement that, and I think it's a good thing we think, 20 years ago, the world was shocked by the terrible atrocities and human rights violation in Darfur. And the UN are now worried that a similar dynamic might be developing. So I just want to share this because I'm going to talk about kind of like the situation in Palestine a little later on, but I just want us to remind of what is taking place in the world, the conflict that's taking place everywhere. I should also just remind you that this war has displaced more than 4.8 million people within Sudan and forced a further 1.2 million people to flee to neighboring countries. Over 1,200 people, 1,200 children under the age of 5 have died between May and September. And this is due to a measles outbreak combined with high levels of malnutrition, all caused by this conflict. So it's just important just to have a global context of what's taking place in the world as well. Unfortunately, I've got to follow up with another conflict taking place in the African world at the same time. And that's the 7 million people in the Democratic Republic of Congo who have been displaced due to ongoing conflict and violence. It's now recognized as one of the largest internal displacement and humanitarian crises in the world. So again, like I said, I'm not going to label this. We tend to deal with the news in the UK, but it's important that we wonder if we think about if we're unaware of these numbers and we're unaware of these issues, why are we unaware of these issues? Why are they being played down? What's happening? Why is our consciousness not aligned to helping to deal and resolve these issues? Okay, now again, it's a complex one. Please forgive me nerding out. I have to provide context. I can't just share news stories without explaining it. So the headline is really clear that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines has been criticised for taking on this honour, which he opposes for the Garifuna people. And let me explain what I mean by that. You see, because what happened recently was that Gonzalez, who I actually met, he seems like a very, principled person. I mean, I don't know much about him, but I had good interactions with him. Some people say he's not quite so. It's a bit, but I mean, I haven't had any issues with him. Now, Gonzalez, who's the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, Portuguese heritage, as you could probably see, or you can't tell, but that's what he is. He has been accorded the chieftaincy title, Omawale of Utter, which means our son has returned back home. That's what Omawale means. The same title that Brother Malcolm X received. So he received this in Nigeria. So he's now an honorary chief in Utter. And the reason why people are angry with him, though, is that he denied that same title to the Garifuna people of St. Vincent and Grenadines. And that community, for those of you who don't know, are the country's first exiled people. And they consider St. Vincent and the Grenadines as their spiritual homeland. Now, many of them live in America now. They live in the United States. This is because they were exiled to Honduras in the late 18th century. However, they still see St. Vincent and the Grenadines as their ancestral home. They call it Urimine. That's the term they have. So, I mean, I was looking into this because it just kind of like really hurt my heart to learn this. I hate the idea of us doing unto others what others have done to us. It just doesn't. So I looked into this, and Gonzalez actually said, when you give them honorary citizenship, our Garifuna brothers and sisters, are they going to come out from Belize, from Nicaragua, from Honduras and Guatemala? Are they going to come out of those countries and look for jobs in St. Vincent? Are they coming for your houses? Because I want to know what this involves, right? If you're going to be an honorary citizen, what does that involve? And he recognizes that they are brave. He recognizes that they're honorable. He talks about like them fighting back against British oppression, and he talks about them in very positive terms. But he refuses to give them this title. He will give them an honorary title, but he won't allow them to become citizens. And I just find it. I just find it disappointing. But that's your history lesson for today. Let me move on. Actually, it literally is a history lesson. This is the last one in this section. And this is just a heads up, really, about an exhibition that's going to take place at the VNA East in 2025. And this is going to be this massive exhibition about music of people of African heritage in the UK. Another tagline, I've got it in front of me, is from jazz to calypso, dub poetry to UK drill lyrics, drum and bass raves to grime freestyles, the brilliance and cross-cultural richness of Black British music will be the focus for inaugural exhibition, blah, 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 blah. Opening in 2025, The Music is Black, that's what it's called, The Music is Black, a British story will span from 1900s to the present day, celebrating everyone from the pioneers such as Winifred Atwell, I don't know, and Janet Kay to today's generation, including Stormzy and Little Sims. And so it's going to be an exhibition that covers what they say everyone, right? Everyone who's Black or African heritage in the UK. And as a music lover, as someone who has quite an active career in the music industry, I'm interested to see if they cover street sell. The curator is Jacqueline Springer. I don't know them, but so far it looks like those of us who actually engage in making music at a grassroots level are going to be excluded from this story, as we often are, and it's quite disappointing. And when I say those of us, I'm not just talking about myself as a former record label owner and record producer, but I'm talking about people like Rick Clark, Tongue in Cheek, Zushi, Everest, Cruz. I could go on and on. I'm not even talking about hip hop. People know about Moni Love. They don't always know about the Cookie Crew. They don't know about Derek Boland. There's a whole era of people who didn't get signed to major labels, that run independent labels, that were making political statements against the oppression that we are facing through just our resilience to push back and actually become part of an industry and create our own industry that was ignoring us. And we're never written about, we're never spoken about, we're never honored. So I'm hoping, because this is on my front doorstep, that this exhibition doesn't do that. Hackney Museum did a really good job encompassing kind of like the story of those of us who are engaged in that movement. Some of them, some of us will talk about Lovers Rock. We'll talk about kind of like, what we brought to this. But this is just a pet peeve of mine, that when we hear about these music exhibitions, they always tend to be a bit shallow. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Let me go to the next section because we're running out of time. And so just as a reminder, that's a lot of talking I've been done. My voice is starting to go. You are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. Just a reminder, if you're watching us live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Sister Oleander, are you still there in the studio? Everyone's a bit silent today. I know there's a lot of news, but please feel free. Don't be intimidated. You're still there? Cool. Sister Oleander's with us. So please feel free.
I am here. There's no other comments going through. So, yeah.
I think my voice is just putting everyone to sleep. So I'll just keep rambling on. And I'm going to go through policing-related issues that's affecting our community. And this is stuff from the last couple of weeks. So let's get started. Okay, so a West Yorkshire PC has been dismissed over sharing racist and misogynistic messages over social media. I think it was WhatsApp. So the West Yorkshire Police have got rid of him. His name was PC Lewis Heppelston. I'm going to say something. He was also found not just having racist material on his phone, but he also had an image of men in balaclavas posing with flags of the Ulster Defence Association. This is a banned Northern Ireland paramilitary group. So there is something that makes me think, was he dismissed because of his racist and misogynist content? Or was he dismissed because he had and shared an image of a banned or prescribed paramilitary group? It's just something to think about, right? I mean, I'm happy that he's gone. It also asks many questions about recruitment, yeah? I mean, how was he recruited? How did this PC get his job in the first place? What's the due diligence? What did they do? How did he? Yeah. But anyway, it's just something to think about, right? So even though the headlines we're seeing in the media is that he had racist content, he had misogynistic content, and he was fired, don't run away with that headline. It's not as simple as that. And the reason why I say that is because, surprise, surprise, we have a story of DC Victoria Teagle, who was only given a final written warning despite the disciplinary disciplinary panel finding her guilty of gross misconduct. So she had clearly shared racist content. I think there's no question about that. But she wasn't dismissed. And it just makes me think, right? It's like, why was the PC dismissed, but the detective sergeant not dismissed? And I think there's something about the rank and about the investment of money placed in these officers, and seeing the PC as fodder that they can get rid of easily, but the DS as someone who's been through the ranks, who's a senior position, like, give them another chance. Give them another chance. So, like I said, this story, as much as it seems like it's, unrelated, these two stories, I think there's something here that we're seeing. It's also, remember, this story is a Met, that was West Yorkshire. There's something there about how the police are treating people at different ranks who are engaged in racist or misogynistic misconduct. Because the gross misconduct that we were promised that, now that the tape has been, what's that word? The red tape has been got rid of following, after gross misconduct, that they can get rid of officers. Why wasn't she fired? Makes you think, right? And let me move on. There's so much to say. Sister Oleander, did you want to say something?
Yes, sorry. I've got 2 comments. One from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation. No, he says, I am listening. And also Black Lives Matter UK say they're listening too. And I think that was because you said, are people sleeping?
Well, I'm glad to know that you're not asleep. Thank you. Thank you for the heads up. Okay, so let me keep going on. So the next story is about statistics, basically. So the Metropolitan Police, we just found out, puts at least 70 children in hospital each year with dog bites, tasers, and what they're classifying as rough arrests. And the image at the top that you can see is that of a young 16-year-old boy being punched and kicked as officers try to pin him down to the ground in a garden in 2022. Now, I don't want to second guess what's taking place there. I don't have all the facts, and I don't do wrong and strong. But the fact that there's 70 children who've been hospitalized, and the majority of them, I say majority, there's disproportionately a number of them are of African heritage. It does worry me. I'd like to know more information about this. Rowley was questioned, that's the police commissioner. He was questioned about this. And he said that the use of a taser or police dog would often be appropriate when dealing with a 16-year-old armed with a knife. He says that's very sad and very unfortunate, but tragically it's necessary. Well, excuse me if I don't take your word for it. I want to know more information before I can even, consider the idea that these levels of force are necessary. I'm not saying that young people, especially, I'm not saying that, in instances where there's a knife, I'm not saying that there's not need to use, what do they call it? What's that term? Rough arrests, if someone is fighting back and placing themselves or other people or the public at harm. But I can't take the Metropolitan Police at face value of these kind of things. So this all came out during one of these panels at City Hall, the one that people like me can't go to, but we have other community role models and leaders talking on our behalf. Anyway, like I said, I need evidence. I need to see the facts, and then I can make an informed assessment. And I'll look at each of the 70 cases. That's the way I roll. The next story is, what can I say? We've just seen a report that 43 police forces who asked for help. 43 police forces referred people who asked for help to the Home Office in the last 3 years. And let me be clear about this. These are people who've asked for help, women, from domestic violence. And so what's happening here? Women are facing domestic abuse. But if they go to the police, there's the threat that they will face deportation. Now, in the past, I knew the stories. In fact, and this is the reason why there's a picture of Sister Space there as well. In the past, we spoke about the fact that sometimes women wouldn't go to the police because they didn't want their partners to be arrested or assaulted or deported, etc. But what I'm saying now is that we've just found out is that it's not only just the men who are often the abusers who face that risk, but also the victims who call the police have been, not could be, but have been reported to the Home Office for deportation. And so, this is why it's so important that Sister Space has been able to open up its specialist refuge for women of African heritage. It's the first one in the UK. And it just means that they can provide a safe space, which they've normally, I think, put sisters into hotels, etc. So they can assess what the situation is, give support, rather than just running straight to the authorities until they get all the facts there, because we can't trust the system. It doesn't cater for the specific needs of African women. And I'm talking about African women, but of course, if the police are reporting women being reported to the Home Office after making a complaint, and we're talking about not just African women, but women from all marginalized minority ethnic communities. So this is the section on health. I think you know where you are. The Legalities Pan-African Community News update. I'm going to just keep going through. These are the stories from the last couple of weeks. I think there's only a few to cover here. The first story is one that received quite a bit of coverage, and then it was just, I say coverage on one day, and then it was buried in 5 minutes. And that's the fact that African babies in England were 3 times more likely to die than European babies. And, we heard about the mortality rate of African women, mothers, kind of dying from childbirth was going through the roof. But of course, I didn't even think it. It's not just the mothers now, it's also the babies themselves. And so this report that comes from the National Child Mortality Database has found that inequalities between rich and poor areas are actually widening. So as poverty is increasing and inequality is getting bigger, so the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, babies are dying. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Now, the NHS has published a 3-year plan for maternity and neonatal services, and it talks about how it will make maternity and neonatal care safer, more personalised, and this is their way of saying culturally specific and competent for all women and babies and families. But we've heard this before. This is where we are now. Sister Oleander.
Yes, we have a message from Mr. IC3 Black Reparation Nation saying, Adija, I've just realized, didn't realize he's posted quite a few in the last few seconds. 1 second. Sorry. Right. So the first one is, would Legali endorsed Adija? Adija is a new initiative conceived and established by Reparation Nation Limited, headquartered in London. And then he says, Adija is not seeking funding, asking for money or partnership, but rather the endorsement of its vision. It's dedicated to creating a Black African autonomous entity for empowerment and reparatory justice. And there's 2 more. The term Black refers to individuals classified as IC3 Black under the race and ethnicity standards established by the UK government. Adija is committed to advocating for the interests, welfare, and historical justice of the IC3 Black community with a focus on holistic betterment. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I suppose the spirit of what Adija is advocating, I'm completely for. I saw the leaflet and I went through it and I liked what it was trying to do. And I think it's difficult to disagree with the focus on actually grassroots community taking ownership of these issues. I think the only area that I'd had to sit down with is that right at the end, there was something about how reparation would work and how who's classified as involved and who's not. And there were some qualifiers I disagreed with. So there were things like a bloodline, etc., and things like this. And I think that's quite problematic. So like I said, in spirit, I'd be happy, but there's a few details at the end because I don't, the concept of race is not something that I subscribe to. I can never sign off on that part of the component, but the organizing and the strategy and the philosophy is perfect. It's a very good idea, and I do like self-determinist organization. But this is probably a different discussion for another day. Maybe this is something we could do in a program. But thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm going to continue on with the program. Was that the last comment? Is this Oleander? Okay, I'm going to say the classic, you're muted, but yes, I guess that was. Thank you. Okay, so the next story. Oh, God, this is, well, as you know, Sister Oleander and I are involved with sickle cell. We're part of a peer-to-peer support group in Hackney and City of London. This one's really, really irritated me. The sister, Cara Campbell, she made some comments in the media recently about the challenges she's facing with receiving competent treatment in hospital. She's actually explained how she sometimes would actually just pretend her crisis is over, that the pain that she's feeling is gone, just so she could leave hospital. And this is because sometimes what happened was that the people in hospital just weren't they weren't there to support it properly. I mean, some of the staff, not all of them, because there's some amazing staff who support sickle cell patients, but some of the staff would not administer the right medication during a crisis, and she actually felt scared. So this is the point that she was making. This is nothing new, right? Sickle cell patients often feel that some staff members are compassionate and some are just there for a paycheck. And when you're in a crisis and you're feeling vulnerable, if the staff looks like it's going to leave you there in pain and you could actually end up with more harm, some people want to leave. Some people can't leave, but some people want to leave. So she explained this. But the point about this story is that she made this comments, and this is nothing new. Like I said, there's been a campaign that highlights this, and she's been attacked. She's been attacked online continuously because she spoke out about this, and they're saying that she's trying to stoke some kind of race war. And it just makes me so angry. These are people who have no idea what it's like to live with sickle cell, or to have a child or someone in your family with sickle cell. No idea whatsoever, and they can take. I'm probably a bit biased. It's a bit too close to home. It just irritates me. So that's the story. I'm going to move on, but it is frustrating. And okay, so the last story to deal specifically with health is this one, which is talking about mental health. And there was a survey. It was called the Black British Voices Survey, and it painted this image, this picture, and it's a real picture, that 87% of African Brits felt that they receive subpar healthcare due to a lack of culturally competent services. And this is kind of like what I was just speaking about with our sister. Now, the survey also revealed that 1 in 10 were definitely proud to be British, but a third didn't see the UK as their long-term home. And it's an interesting statistic, right? Trying to work out that. Now, what they said was that societal pressures to conform to the strong, silent, and resilient type in the face of abject inequity and discomfort has been a huge reason why seeking help has been at the bottom of the agenda for a lot of African men. They just don't want to ask for help. And this is often about how African men are framed by this toxic narrative of so-called black masculinity norms, and it affects our mental health. I mean, there's a book by Bell Hooks, what's it called? We Call. She speaks about this. But anyway, this is the whole point. The survey has revealed that, again, I think I spoke about this with African and Asian women and the menopause, kind of like not talking out and calling for help when they needed help because of the stigma that comes with it. And we've talked about different aspects of this because we don't feel that the health care service has enough culturally competent services. Well, this is to deal with mental health. 87% who took part in the survey feel that no, the service doesn't understand them. And we can do a program on mental health one day. We can talk about the over medication. We can talk about the violence. We can talk about psychosis. I mean, you know, I took part in this amazing, I've forgotten the brother's name now. He's based in Hackney. As a psychologist, he talked about his experience of racism in the as a psychiatrist. And it, you know, again, it just hit my heart. But anyway, that's there. Again, well, no doubt come back to this at some stage. But I want to close with the next section, which is my favorite part of the program. And this is where we talk about positive stories. So just as a reminder, before we wrap up, you are watching the Ugandese Pan-African Community News Update. We should be live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I know some of you can hear us okay. That's good. But please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. You can like, you can share. Let other people know what we're here if you think what we're doing is useful. But I'm going to get on with the stories relating to our community over the past couple of weeks. And so the first story is of Mama Olukemi Atijo-san. Now, she's a mum who diversified school lunches in Suffolk, and she's been honoured by Age UK. Now, she's 70. She's a community activist, and her work and her project is simply running a health club for older people. That's what she does now. But her work started long before that. You see, when she came to the UK from Nigeria in 1975, she'd been based in around Peckham, and she noticed that a lot of children's needs weren't being catered for in school. And the thing that she focused on was the food that they were being fed, the nutrition that they were getting. She felt that actually, these children aren't being fed properly. They're not. People aren't recognizing their cultural needs, their cultural practices. She says that actually, the way that the British do their meals, the way that the schools were having it back in the day was that they were 3-course meals, and a starter, main, and dessert. And she was like, well, actually, as African people, we don't eat like that. That's not how we run our food. So anyway, she started getting engaged in projects and talking to schools as she thought. And now, if you recognize now, in many schools, they actually cater for a wide range of students, and this cultural exchange is amazing. It helps children to bond. It helps teachers to learn. It's a fantastic initiative that she did there, and so that's why Age UK is honouring her work, and we salute you. The next story, and again, this is just a tribute to our elder sister, Mama Edna Jones, who at the age of 105 has been honoured by the Mayor of Newham, and also from a representative from the Mary C. Cole Memorial Association. Now, I don't have much more to say other than that she is a retired nurse, and I just wanted to reflect and honour the work and commitment she made to the health service. And at 105, again, we salute you. So thank you. The next story is one that you probably have heard or seen about, which is often spun in a negative way. I'm not saying negative way, but in a way that doesn't kind of like bring out the best of it. And this is a story of our sister Brenda Burgini, and she was imprisoned after getting involved in a fight after she saw her sister being attacked. She was on tag. She had hopes of being a childminder. That went up in smoke, those ideas. Her life fell apart in front of her. She didn't expect to be there. But what I like about this story is that we can see what's happened 15 years after that. And what she has done is that she's built her life up as Lady Unchained. That's the name she goes under. And that's where she, as a spoken word artist, she engages in an award-winning show on National Prison Radio, where she runs and she created Unchained Poetry. Now, she's a musician and an author, and the platform she has on the radio program is for artists with experience of the criminal justice system. And she uses it to share inspirational storytelling workshops inside prisons as a way of saying there's another way, and giving them hope that there is life after prison. It's like you can make a mistake, but it doesn't have to be the end of it. So I love the fact that she provides us a platform, and that she's a positive story of what can happen afterwards. And so, yeah, simple, we salute you. And this is a story of a Newcastle walk that's been organised by our sister Beverly Pravat Goldstein. Now, she comes from an organisation called African Lives in North England, and she says that when you're walking around Newcastle, you know that you're walking in the steps, or the giant footsteps of great people of African descent who have built this city, built the North East, and built this country. And that's what she wanted people to understand, because she knows that, but she thought not a lot of people didn't know. So she built this tour, this route with historic England. It's one of the only 2 trails in the city teaching participants about the lives of people of African heritage and those who aren't known. Yeah, it's doing very well. She talks about the visit by Muhammad Ali, of famous anti-slavery campaigners. I spoke about Alaudo Equiano, but she also talks about Ida B. Wells and Ira Aldrich. And yeah, sometimes the simple projects are often the best. So, Sister Beverly, we salute you. And this is a double-edged story. It goes both ways. Perhaps I'll start with a negative. I'll start with a negative and then on a positive. So some of you will know that Rio Ferdinand receives a lot of racist abuse from football fans, from members of the public. And recently, a Wolverhampton Wanderers fan named Jamie Arnold was found unanimously guilty of racially abusing him. So he recognized that he'd done something wrong, and I don't think he put up a defense, which is good. But why do they do this? Well, it's not just as simple as Ferdinand being someone of African heritage. It's also the fact that he has a foundation called the Rio Ferdinand Foundation. And this is an amazing project which introduces young people from working class families to engage in projects that kind of like widen their career aspects, their ideas of what they can do in the future. It gives them networking opportunities to meet with other people so that they don't fall down a negative trap. And so just a week ago, he organized this football match that you can see, which supported young people. I mean, it was for boys and girls aged between 14 to 16. And he did it before in Lambeth. Sadly, he couldn't make it to this particular session, but he did send, like a message, etc. But this Positive Future program is a really good thing. And I like the fact that we're seeing footballers, and he's not the only one. There are other footballers. I don't do much on the sports in the Pan-African Community News program, but there are other sportsmen and other footballers who actually do use some of their wealth, and they have significant wealth, to give back to the community. And, again, we salute you on that. This one, for those of you who are ETs, I really love this one, simply because it's just someone, I say someone, so 2 sisters, Dawn Burton and Marsha Barnett, who run their own organisations. Would I write them down? Carrie Burton and Jerk Shack. And they just said that actually it's about time we had a prestigious award ceremony to recognise the popularity of Caribbean food in the UK. Where's our props? Why doesn't anyone remember? Why doesn't anyone honour what it is that we're doing? So they just launched the first one, and it went well. They did it in association with Just Eat. They showcased the very best in industry, from the top restaurants and food and drink products and business owners and entrepreneurs. And, they said that the awards are to celebrate the hard work and be a platform for many of the hundreds of Caribbean food businesses, some which have been in operation for over 30 years with little to no business guidance or networking. There's a lot of work to be done, but the award ceremony is a good, positive place to start. And I agree with them. And I just love the fact that sometimes if you're not recognized by, others, those who claim to be, appreciate diversity or are supposed to be equitable and providing finance and funds and advice and support to everyone, then we had to just do it ourselves, and patting ourselves on the back sometimes is a good thing. For me, there's no greater award than being awarded by your peers. Nothing. I will never kneel down in front of a British monarch or some clown from government and take some kind of trinket. Dishonorable people cannot bestow honors. But in my community, says Brother Toyin, respect. And I have them. Actually, I actually have in this room, you can't see them right now. I actually have some awards which come from the community, which I treasure. I treasure them because they come from the people that I am of, that I love and love me back. There's nothing more than that. And so it's a very simple initiative. I don't like, Oleander knows, I don't really do these kind of like big dress up kind of event things. It's not my thing really, but I love the mission. I love the project. I'm a bit shy for all of that stuff, but it's a good thing to do. So we salute you.
I just wanted to say that, boy, I would have loved to be there at that Caribbean Awards ceremony. Can you imagine how good the food would have been there?
That's a good point, actually.
Oh, but yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, the days of us waiting to be acknowledged by the wider society, it's ridiculous. We need to acknowledge ourselves. Because that's all part of, I think, also our own personal reparations too, to claim back what is ours and what has always been ours. I'd love to see the jollof rice wars go like this as well. That way, I know they do have different events for jollof rice and all the rest of it, but those are mostly in parks and things like that. So I'd love to see, the sort of continent food done in the same way as this. I think that'd be great.
It would be. In fact, today I saw an amazing tweet on Twitter. I know it's called X, but I can't be asked. Excuse the language. Can't be bothered. About sorrow and how sorrow is, and it was just a beautiful thread. It was talking about sorrow, but it was also recognizing it's also Bissap, because I know it's Bissap from Senegal, and it has different names in Nigeria, it has different names in different places on the continent in Ghana. And it was just a lovely thread just showing how our cuisine and our culture survives. Irrespective of all the attacks that we face and all the hardship we have, we find a way to reinvent and to keep it alive. And so this was just focusing on drink, but there's other examples of food inside that. I'm not going to get into the jollof thing, because the jollof wars starts pure trouble and like,
absolutely.
It's like, so I'm not even going to go there. But I hear you on that. Anyway, let me move on, because we're almost at the end of the program. Give thanks. Okay, so the next I salute is again, it's just the doing for self thing that I love. And this is our sister Veronica Kumata, and she runs I shouldn't say she runs, I don't know she runs it. She's part of an organization or a charity called Ladies Fighting Breast Cancer. And what she decided to do was donate 80 softies, and you can see them in the image, to Birmingham City Hospital, because she wanted to have a prosthetic after a mastectomy that matched her skin color, and she found out she couldn't have one, and so she just came up with this idea about, well, why don't we just create one, and not only do we create one for myself, but why don't we create one and provide it to the hospital, so that anyone else who has to go through the same treatment doesn't have to have that same dilemma. And she said that going through breast cancer was already hard enough, and not having the right skin tone was just another awful thing to be concerned about. And I've got nothing but respect, right? How we don't hear about these stories on television. We don't see them. They're not in the newspaper out there. They're not, it's rare that we get them. I mean, maybe having been local newspapers, which is how I get to hear about it, and our research team that provides these, but we don't make enough noise about this. So again, Sister Veronica, we salute you. Thank you. Okay, this one's going to get me in some trouble. Okay, this one's going to get me in some trouble. Because I don't do this normally, and we're coming to the end of the program, and this is, I don't think we had time for this. I did play back the idea of having a section, Toyin's opinion, or some nonsense like this, right? That's what this one's really about, because a couple of things vexed me this week, and I know some of you here are Pan-Africanists, and you possibly love Dr. Umar Johnson. You've seen his films and his reputation, and so you think that he's he calls himself the Prince of Pan-Africanism. Well, for someone like myself who's an elder, Umar Johnson is not the Prince of Pan-Africanism. Our brother Malcolm, if anyone, would be the Prince of Pan-Africanism. And you cannot say the same two people in the same sentence. They're of different caliber, different qualities. And I say this because, this week I faced some critics and some critique from fellow Pan-Africanists who, I won't say they were upset, but they weren't supportive of me supporting the struggles of the Palestinian people. They felt, well, Toyin, you're Pan-Africanist, only focus on the oppression of African people. We have sympathy and empathy, but don't spend your time there, stuff like that. And I understand where they're thinking is from. But that's not who I am. That's not what Pan-Africanism is. In fact, Malcolm makes a really good point. He says that you cannot separate peace from freedom, because no one can be at peace unless he has his freedom. And this quote isn't supposed to just limit itself to us, because Malcolm does speak about Zionism. He does talk about the Palestinian struggle on a wider level. It's supposed to be about being against and opposed to all forms of injustice. We hear this from Martin Luther King. We hear this from Nelson Mandela. So it's, how can I say it? Malcolm, or if I use his correct term, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, understood that those who experience Ma'afa, Shoah, Nakba, or Exodus, for those of you who are not familiar, Ma'afa is obviously our enslavement and colonialism. Shoah is what they call the Jewish Holocaust. Nakba is a great displacement. It's taking place in Palestine, or Exodus is the displacement of and genocide against the Amerindian people. That all of us who experience that, all of us who know all this pain, this historic injustice, we should be united against all forms of colonial violence, all forms of oppression, all forms of capitalist exploitation. We should not be agents of it. This is a really important principle. And it reminded me of what happened when the massacre took place in Grenfell. And some people were like, Toyin, why are you supporting Grenfell? There's all these other people in there, the Arabs and the European. Why are you in there? Why are we in other people's business? And I used to get vexed with them. It's the same kind of thing. And I understand it, right? There's not enough of us engaged in Pan-Africanism for the fight. We've got limited resources. I get it. I understand it. But we can't be like that. We just can't be like that. We are human-centered first. I'm not saying that I don't prioritize. I mean, this program is purely a Pan-Africanist program, but at no time do I replicate the tactics, the philosophy, and the ideology of those that have caused us harm and caused the rest of the planet harm. I don't ever want to be that, and none of us should aspire to be that. And so I know Umar Johnson's video is quite popular. This whole thing about we wish the Palestinians well, but it's got nothing to do with us. I know it's very popular. I know it's probably gone viral. I ain't into that. Okay, so this is my opinion. In fact, what I will say is that I was at the march on Saturday. I was, yeah. And there was this amazing poem which was made written by Michael Rosen. It was called Don't Mention the Children. And it reminded me, like when we go on the Grenfell rallies on the 14th of every month, it hasn't happened for a while. One day I'm going to talk about tactical issues with marches and why they don't work. Having a lot of people doesn't in itself bring about change. That's another discussion for another day, because it does upset me sometimes. But what happens at the end of each Grenfell rally, we call out those 72 plus names and we remember. And that happened, there was 50 names of the children who were called out. It was so powerful. And Michael Rosen's Jewish. Okay, it's like he understands the Shoah, and he doesn't want to be complicit in an Nakba or an Nakba version 2. So this is my opinion. I don't know if I'm going to keep the section going because no doubt I'll get attacked and all kinds of stuff. But I just want to leave it at that. This program has never really been about mass numbers. It's always been about just putting something, creating an archive, and just being there for you so you can find the information in one point. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so Black Lives Matter UK said 100. So they agree with what you're saying 100%.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so last slide. Okay, self-promotion again. So just as a reminder, those of you who know, I am a lecturer, and one of the things I believe quite strongly about is actually making sure that education is accessible to everyone. So every year, I do it twice a year actually, I have what's called an open classroom. And this open classroom for this year is on political anthropology and urban ethnography. So you are welcome to come and learn more. We do a couple of readings. It's a heavily discussion-based session, only lasts for a couple of hours. It's at the IDPED Centre in Hackney. I'd suggest that you register online if you want to come, because it's limited space and I need to know. So there's a link. If you can see the link in the slide, I'll blow up the slide again. So the link's there. If you can type it in, you can hopefully see it. The formsoffice.com / I know it's a long thing and stuff like that, but I don't know how else to send it out there. That's taking place. You're welcome, but you must register. That's the only thing I could say there. The logo, the poster, this Tuesday, there's a Palestine teaching taking place at UCL. That's where I work. It's going to be attended by staff and students. Anyone can come as well, I think. So if you want to learn more about what's taking place, it's there for you.
Can you just leave it big so that I can? I'm typing it in the chat, so if people want to use it.
Cool. All right. Or what I might do is send it to you later, and then. But that's cool. Okay, so I'll put it big there as well, so you can hear my voice.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. I need to find a better way to actually share these kind of things. But what I want to do is just to remind you. Some people are like, "What, Toyin? Why do you have an open classroom? What's the point? Why I teach undergraduates. I teach postgraduate students. Like, why do I do these things for?" Well, how can I say it? There's an amazing quote which I love from Bell Hooks in one of her books, Teaching to Transgress. In fact, that's the chapter of the book, Teaching to Transgress. And she says that the classroom remains one of the most radical spaces of possibility in the academy. I celebrate teaching that enables transgressions, a movement against and beyond boundaries. It is in that movement which makes education a practice of freedom. And I'm about freedom. I'm about liberation. That's I think what I was put on this earth to do and help during my journey here in this realm. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being with us. That's the last slide. I want to say, as ever, I want to thank our brother Colin for his research, and those of you who share information with me during the 2 weeks. I want to thank you who are there listening right now, and those who listening sometime in the future. Could be this week, could be next week, could be next decade. Greetings, those of you in 100 years from now. Legally supporters and community, we couldn't do this without you. We will be back on the 26th of November, 2023, between 7 and what's the time now? Oh my God, it's 2044. That's a long program. Okay, this is a challenge, right? Oh God, I had to cut out the news. What do I do? Do I limit it to 5 stories a section? Do I be ruthless? Because it's difficult to know which stories to cut. This is bad discipline, right? I've got bad discipline. I'm gonna have to start getting better at this. But I can't cut the good stories. The positives, we have to have positive news. I mean, that's, I still want to play around the idea of changing, having a poll or something on changing the day. So instead of doing it on a Sunday, maybe try it on a Monday evening. Maybe once the term finishes, because we only broadcast during term times, university term times. Maybe the next term I'll try it on a Monday and see how that works. And if that's not popular, we'll go back to the Sunday. I don't know. We'll figure out how it goes. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, Sister Oleander, I don't know if you want to say anything before we sign off.
What do I want to say? I want to say wrap up warm because the nights are drawing in. It's getting colder. And stay safe out there. Sometimes it's not nice, but let's have each other's back, and one love to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to just close this effort and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us all. Ashe.
Ashe.